You ever get that feeling that politics is just broken? Like it's this loud, angry thing happening somewhere else that has absolutely nothing to do with your real life. Well, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're going to dig into why so many people seem to be checking out of traditional politics and what that actually means for all of us.
So let's just kick things off with a number that'll kind of make your jaw drop. Since the 1980s, political parties in well established democracies, we're talking places like Canada, Norway, and France, they've lost over half of their members. That's not a small dip. That is a massive exodus from the very core of political life.
And that, of course, leads to the big question. What's going on here? Why are people just walking away? Is it that we're all just tired of it? Is it frustration with the system? Or is something much, much deeper changing in our communities? Let's find out.
Okay, so first up, let's just look at the scene of the crime, so to speak. What's the actual evidence? What are the clear signs that public participation in the old school way of doing politics is really on the decline?
And just so we're all on the same page, when we say civic engagement, what we're really talking about is just people taking an active role in public life. Yeah, that means voting for sure, but it's also about volunteering, joining a local group, or campaigning for something you believe in. It's basically the lifeblood of a healthy democracy. So the symptoms are kind of interesting because they point in two different directions at once. On the one hand, you see all the traditional numbers falling off a cliff, fewer people voting, party memberships cratering. But on the other hand, you see this rise in stuff like protest movements and just this general feeling that politics has become a dirty word. People aren't just tuning out. A lot of them are actively pushing back. And if you want a really stark example, just look at the United Kingdom. We're talking about a country with a super long democratic history, right? Well, today, fewer than 1% of adults there belong to a political party. 1%. That is a tiny, tiny fraction of people who are formally plugged into the political machine.
Okay, so if those are the symptoms, what's causing the disease? Let's play detective for a minute and investigate the usual suspects that researchers point to for this whole disconnect.
And well, the list of potential culprits is pretty long. We spend way more time in front of screens, which keeps us isolated. The way our towns and cities are designed, with big suburbs and long commutes, literally leaves us with less time and energy to connect with our neighbors. Then you throw in a huge generational shift in habits, plus a media that kind of thrives on scandal and cynicism, and you've got the perfect recipe for a massive civic disconnect.
But, all those factors can feel a little scattered. To really understand the whole picture, to tie it all together, we need a theory. And for that, we have to talk about the really groundbreaking work of a political scientist named Robert Putnam.
So, back in 2000, Putnam wrote this bombshell of a book called Bowling Alone. And what he noticed was that it wasn't just that people weren't joining political parties anymore. They weren't joining anything as much. Not social clubs, not volunteer groups, not even bowling leagues. The actual fabric of community life was getting thinner. And the huge idea he introduced was this concept of social capital. Honestly, it's the perfect term for it. Think of it as the invisible glue that holds a society together. It's the trust we have in each other, the networks we build, that sense of belonging that comes from, just being part of something. When that glue starts to weaken, our democracy starts to weaken too. And he breaks it down into two types, which is super helpful. First, you've got bonding capital. That's the connection you have with people who are like you, your close friends, your family. But then, and this is the really, really critical part, there's bridging capital. That's what connects people who are different across class or race or political beliefs. Without that bridging, we lose our ability to find common ground. Compromise becomes almost impossible, and society starts to fracture into these isolated little tribes that don't trust each other. Okay, so things are looking a little bleak, right? It sounds like we're all just drifting apart. But here's where the story takes a fascinating twist. Is civic engagement really dying, or is it just changing its clothes? It turns out, the evidence suggests it's not disappearing, it's transforming. I mean, just look at the history here. It's not some straight line plummeting to the ground. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, civic engagement absolutely exploded in Eastern Europe and brought down dictatorships. Then, the 2000s saw a decline in a lot of Western countries. But then suddenly, you had new grassroots movements, like the Tea Party, pop up in the US, proving that the energy to get involved was still there. It was just finding new places to go. So if people aren't putting that energy into political parties, where did it go? It didn't just evaporate.
It's now being channeled into things like single-issue pressure groups, anti-establishment movements, online networks, and big street protests. The engagement hasn't vanished, it's just moved outside of the traditional buildings of power. This whole new landscape leads us to a really useful question, one we can ask ourselves. In this changing world, what kind of citizen are you? There's a framework that actually divides us into 3 pretty clear types. So at the very bottom, you have the apathetics. These are the folks who are completely checked out. Then in the middle, you have the spectators. This is the biggest group by far. They'll follow the news, they'll show up and vote, but that's pretty much it. And then at the very top, you have the gladiators. They're the small but super active minority who are doing the real work, organizing, campaigning, really fighting for their causes. And that right there, that really hits the nail on the head. This is the fundamental challenge for any democracy today. For the whole system to be healthy, it just can't be a spectator sport. The goal has to be to find ways to move more people out of the passive seats and into the active arena. And that brings it all back to us, doesn't it? It leaves us with one final, kind of unavoidable question. When you look at this new landscape of engagement, and you think about your own actions, from voting, to volunteering, to arguing online, to protesting, where do you fit in? Are you a spectator? Or are you a gladiator? And what would it take to change?